Hey there, I'm Dale McFadden, and welcome to another episode of Dropping the Hammer with Dale McFadden. Uh, Earlier this week on ESPN, a new E60 documentary called Fistful of Steel: The Rise of Bubba Wallace debuted. And I got the chance to talk to the writer and the man behind it, Ryan McGee, a longtime ESPN motorsports writer for the podcast. So we talked for almost an hour about the documentary and NASCAR in general. We started out talking about Spider-Man, No Way Home, Marvel, and a little bit of Star Wars. So that's the first thing you will see and hear us talking about uh, on this episode of Driving the Hammer. I've been wanting to have a conversation with Ryan for a long time like this. He's my favorite active NASCAR rider. He's who I want to be when I grow up, and I'm 30, almost 31. So without further ado, here's my exclusive interview with Ryan McGee of ESPN about his new E60 documentary on Bubba Wallace, and also we talk about his E60 documentary from earlier this year on the 20th anniversary of the death of Dale Earnhardt. So we get to talk about both of those. He's got some great stories to tell, and this is just a really fun conversation, and I can't wait to have Ryan on the show again. So here it is, my conversation with ESPN's Ryan McGee.
How about this one and the other one? But my daughter, I was all proud of myself the morning they went on sale. I got 3 tickets for tonight at like 7:30, and
That's what
I was
mine
in,
is. So
and she can't go to like a midnight show because she's got school tomorrow. So we're going. That's a really long way of saying we're going Saturday morning.
they don't do midnight showings anymore.
No, it sucks. Uh, I was doing. I got a group of guys in Omaha. The ESPN radio guys in Omaha do hit with they're big Star Wars guys, and we were having
Yeah.
that conversation yesterday about um, the death of the midnight showing. But whatever, I'm too old for that anyway. The, I remember when Return of the King came out, which is an hour too long anyway, and it started like 12:15, and we all went to sleep. Like I have no idea what happened. So anyway,
Wow.
yeah. Oh
My
well.
first midnight showing was, I think, The Dark Knight, or
Yeah.
or, or, Incredible or Incredible Hulk.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey,
Mine was probably I think ours was Phantom Menace. I think Phantom Menace might have been the first time anybody did that. Like we did it. We went to like an 11:30 showing, and everybody was dressed up and the whole damn thing. So it was cool. But
yeah, I did not.
yeah,
Unfortunately, I didn't get to do any midnight showings for Star Wars.
yeah.
Unfortunately, for the sequel trilogy or the
Well, you well, you know my story, right? About Force Awakens was same thing. You know, my daughter, I guess, would have been probably in elementary school at the time, and the or middle school. It was middle school because the my wife's like, well, we can't go this weekend because of this, and this.
oh
She
man.
goes, she's like, we'll see it on Monday. I was like, okay. And so I dropped my daughter off at school, drove straight to the theater, and it was like a 7:50 a.m. showing, and literally everyone in the theater was a
Boy.
40-something-year-old dude, and we're all crying,
Yeah.
when Han dies. So when it's over with, this one guy stands up and he goes, everybody's got on suits, and they're all bankers and shit. And one guy goes, he goes, okay, we all agree none of us were here right now. Right? We're like, yeah. So, because we were all in the same boat. We're like, yeah, I ain't waiting till Monday. But anyway, all right, sorry. But yeah, I'm excited about Spider-Man. So then the
All
reviews
right.
have been great. I haven't read any reviews, but the numbers are amazing. So
Yeah, I haven't read anything. I think I had one thing spoiled for me by Reddit, unfortunately.
yeah, see, I put it on lockdown. Like I mute
Yeah.
stuff. I got a friend named Sean O'Connell who writes for Cinema Blend, and he's a huge Spider-Man guy, but he's the worst. Like he gives up everything. So I always mute him like
Yeah.
in the weeks leading up to anyway. So
Yeah, I have
yeah, I'm excited.
I have everything muted. You'll
Yep.
appreciate this. I made a TikTok last night. Um that the title is trying to avoid Spider-Man spoilers.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
all it is an edited version of the Sports Center Y2K commercial.
yeah. That's
Um
it. That's it. That's
and,
awesome.
it,
That's
and
awesome.
at the end, instead of I covered up Sports Center, so it says this is the internet.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. I have to go look that up.
So welcome to Dropping the Hammer, Ryan McGee. I think you're probably the first person I've had on the show that could really appreciate the title and the title treatment.
Oh no, I have been since the moment that I first saw your choice of font, of design, of color. You knew that I knew exactly what you were doing, and I appreciate that. So bravo to you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, I've got these on display right over here by my.
I want that. I want that.
There you go. I found that in a. Yeah, look, I got them all right here. So there you go. I should have had those. Should have had those displayed behind me.
I have the Superflow car and the Hardee's car. I need the Chevy and the Mellow Yellow cars.
Yeah, my daughter found them because she knew I was going to buy them anyway. So she saw them and bought them for me. So that was nice.
All right, so you're here to talk about Fistful of Steel, The Rise of Bubba Wallace, your E60 documentary. So you've gotten to bookend 2021 with two pretty significant E60 projects about NASCAR, which, for my money, are about the two biggest NASCAR stories of the last 20 years. Would that be your assessment?
Yeah, I agree with that. And man, how fortunate am I that that I've had this relationship with E60, gosh, really since it started. And when we pitched these ideas, and I pitched Bubba, they pitched me on Earnhardt. I was already working on a big project for ESPN.com, and so these are 1 year projects. That Earnhardt thing, we worked on that thing for more than a year.
Really? Okay.
And Bubba Wallace, same thing. Bubba Wallace, the primary interview you see that's kind of the spine through the one of the most, the feeling, Daniel, you don't get it very often in your career, but there's those interviews that you do where you get in the truck to leave and you go, I can't believe that just happened. Like it was 3 hours, and that interview was a long time ago. And so
when was it?
It was months ago. We were working on we were actually working on a like top newsmakers of 2020 story, and we did an interview with Bubba, and it was so good that we immediately were like, we have to do more on this. And so we dedicated a year to working on that, and what a year it was, right? I mean, we had no idea after everything we'd endured in 2020 what was going to happen in 2021, and you also won a race, and so it was. But I'm very fortunate that I'm given the platform to work on projects like that and to pitch projects like that. And yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's only two times you think. I've used this example a lot. It's the only thing I could ever think of that came close to what we saw at Talladega with Bubba Wallace that Monday morning when everyone walked out behind his car was when everyone was lined up to high five Dale Earnhardt, after he won the 98 Daytona 500. And so it's,
I never thought about that.
Yeah, a lot of symmetry there.
So you were interviewing him for something completely different. So once I guess the mandate came down, hey, you're doing the Bubba thing. Like, what was the game plan on like who you wanted to talk to, and how did everything come together, really?
Well, I had done when Bubba made his Daytona 500 debut in 2018. We did a pretty extensive, the big feature unit for Sports Center is called SC Feature. And I had worked with a woman named Lauren Stoll who worked on NASCAR for years, and she's one of the most talented feature producers. I don't care if it's news, sports, whatever. She's a phenomenal producer. And Lauren and I had worked on an extensive story about Bubba Wallace leading into the Daytona 500, and then did a follow-up where she had a crew following Bubba that night. And we had interviewed Wendell Scott's family. We had interviewed Desiree Wallace, Bubba's mom. We'd interviewed Amanda, who at the time was Bubba's girlfriend. Now it's his fiance. And so I already hit on some of these tough topics with them 3 years ago. Yeah. And then when Bubba was so forthcoming and so open, as he always is. But I've had such a great relationship with him for such a long time that he opened up on a lot of topics about his family, about the loss of his cousin, Sean Gillespie, about all these people that in these stories that I think he had told. If you went back and you could piece it together in different places.
Yeah, like he'd been on the Dale Jr. download and stuff and talk touched on some of that stuff. Yeah.
But never all at once in the course of 3 hours, which is what he did this day. We thought we'd interview him for 15, 20 minutes for this thing we were working on, and it went on for 3 hours. And so I was the one that was like, we have to do more with this. And thankfully, it was greenlit. And then that was right after that, or right before that is when they announced the Michael Jordan deal. Then we roll into another Daytona. Let's see how it goes. And one thing led to another. And the original plan was to do it in the summertime, and we decided to wait until the season was over with, which I think was the right thing to do.
Well, because there's not a whole lot going on right now. It could get forgotten, in the middle.
Plus, and he won in October. Yeah. So and that was a big moment, man. It kind of got lost. It was on a Monday at Talladega. I remember I was at the gym and have my laptop out, and I'm working on a college football column. And the races, I asked if they could put the race on one of the TVs there in the cafeteria area. And I knew the rain was coming. We all did. I couldn't hear it, but I could see what was going on. And then I checked the weather radar, and I saw it was really coming. And when I saw him take the lead, that's when I started texting everybody going, hey, everybody in Bristol, Connecticut needs to be watching this race right now, because I think it's going to end and Bubba Wallace is going to win the race. And so, but it kind of got lost, in the middle of football, in the middle of the NBA was starting and everything else. NASCAR suffers from that anyway in the fall. And so for that to have happened on a Monday morning, it just kind of got lost. But yeah, what a moment that was, man. And I think we're going to appreciate it, or the general sports public is going to appreciate it more the further we get away from it.
So when it came to the storytelling part for Fistful of Steel, like what was the most surprising direction it went for you that maybe you weren't expecting?
The family.
Okay.
For Bubba to be as honest as he was about his tenuous relationship with his dad, Dale Earnhardt Sr., for his dad to talk with us about it. And there's a point, and it's in the documentary, where he says, I don't want to talk about that anymore.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, Desiree, Bubba's sister, Amanda, his fiance, they're all very honest about it. And I didn't expect this to go there. And that's the part that, quite frankly, I think that's the part no one really knew about. It was no secret. I mean, Darrell Sr. was a mainstay at the track from the time I first saw Bubba racing Legends cars all the way up until the Daytona 500 2018. He wasn't there. And when I saw how emotional Bubba was after he finished second in that race, I knew a lot of that had to do with just everything that built up to that moment, but also knew it had a lot to do with the fact that I assumed it's because his dad wasn't there. He said something about it, but he'd never really allowed himself to open up about it. And so when the whole family started talking about that, it lends so much perspective on a lot of the things when you go back and see what Bubba said about mental health and about the stress that he was under, and about y'all don't know what I'm dealing with right now. Getting a window into that was not, I expected to talk about Confederate flag. I expected to talk about the noose. I expected to talk about those things. I expected to talk about, winning a race, Wendell Scott, all those things. I did not expect to have that conversation about the family, but I'm thankful that they were all willing to share that.
The documentary, it kind of skipped over a certain area. Like, you don't include like his Xfinity series time with Roush Fenway, or when he subbed for Eric Almirola, which leads to the full-time rides. Can you explain like why you didn't include that particular era of his story?
You only get 70 minutes.
Yeah,
and you've got to hit on some really, the best projects I've ever worked on, whether it's writing a piece or whether it's television, whatever, is when you're leaving stuff on the cutting room floor that you don't want to cut out.
Yeah.
But we only have so much time, and quite frankly too, you got to think about who the E60 audience is, and the E60 audience, to us who follow NASCAR and who love NASCAR all the time, that subbing for Almirola was a big deal. To the general sports audience who just wants to know who is this guy, the X's and O's of that, it was much more important to give that time to the Wendell Scott story, which we all know, again, because we live in the sport. But your stick and ball guy who's watching ESPN in prime time on a Tuesday night, he didn't know that story.
Yeah.
And so you have to make decisions about what you're going to include, what you're not going to include. And in the director's cut, we certainly would have included those things, but in the time that we had, those were the decisions that we made.
Yeah, I wrote in my review, it was like this isn't intended for people who are immersed in the minutia of the NASCAR world. It's for the people who are playing catch up. Yep. But I was curious what if there was any specific reason why you skipped over that.
Well, and you know this too. I was talking to a sports journalism class at an SEC school a few weeks ago, and I was talking about, understand the biggest thing is to understand who your audience is. Mm-hmm. So, if I'm writing a column about, lug nuts that I know is going to go on the NASCAR page at ESPN.com, then I'm going to get down and dirty in that. If back in the ESPN, the magazine days, when I would write a story about, changes coming in the upcoming season, including lug nuts, I've got to explain what that means, or don't even go there at all, because there's just, there's certain, it's understanding who your audience is when you're talking. When I'm doing an interview on Sirius XM NASCAR radio, I can go full racer nerd. If I'm doing the same interview about the Daytona 500 or whatever, and it's on, it's on the Max Kellerman show, then there's a different language that I have to use because I'm trying to explain some things. It's no different than any other sport. It's just no different than you and me talking about Marvel, right? Or Star Wars. Depending on who you're talking to, you can either go as deep as you want, or you need to, pump the brakes a little bit.
It kind of reminds me, years ago, I interviewed Ed Hinton for a story I did for him in grad school, and he talked about his days at Sports Illustrated, and he was writing a story about Indy 500 or something, and like editors came back, don't you think we should explain what a lap is?
Right.
I was like,
I deal with that all the time. I know. I always go back to I worked on a show called RPM Tonight on ESPN2. Yeah. That was my baby when I was right out of college. We started that show, and I remember clear as a bell. We did a dress rehearsal. It was the night of the Rusty Dale Earnhardt, Terry Labonte legendary night race at Bristol.
Wait,
and
95, right?
Yeah. And so I'm sitting in a conference room at the Worldwide Leader in Sports, and I've got my coordinating producer, who's a sports broadcasting legend. I've got my producer, who ended up becoming a phenomenal executive, and I've got a young feature producer who's won Emmys, and I've got Kenny Mayne, who at this point no one had ever heard of. And there's a huge rain delay in that race for 5 hours. I'm answering, what's a yellow flag mean? What's a red flag? Why did they do so and so and so? And that was the night that Kenny looked at me, and he could tell I was getting irritated. He's like, hey, what's a headache powder? It was Kenny's headache powder 500. And so, yeah, but the point is that they asked and they wanted to know. So I've never run people down. I'm not a soccer guy. And I get so irritated. The reason I don't like soccer is because I can't ask any questions. If I ask, what's a so-and-so card, or what's that line mean? You should know this. This is a world game. Well, maybe you should explain it to me, and then I might care. So that's how I've always felt about motorsports, whether it's just somebody on an airplane or whether it's my editor who doesn't know anything about it.
All right. So, social media has a particular temperature when it comes to anything Bubba Wallace related.
Right.
So when this project was announced, what kind of stuff did you see on like Twitter about it?
Oh, I can't tweet anything without hearing about the news. Yeah. I mean, since that day, or since that Tuesday, I to this day, I can't post anything. I can't post a link to a college football column within the first 10 responses being, well, are you still pushing the news narrative or whatever? And so, that's what I'm told. That's what happened this past week. Mute this conversation is the greatest thing that Twitter ever did. I haven't looked at any of it. I know I've had some elected officials come after me.
Really?
Yeah. I haven't seen any of it. I've got, what'll happen is the producers, the directors of the film, they'll all be like, hey, did you hear about so-and-so? I'm like, nope. because I learned during the Confederate flag. I wrote a column about the Confederate flag that I'm still very proud of, and to this day I get hate mail about it. And particularly with the news thing, which NASCAR did none of us any favors with how they handle all that.
No.
And we're all still paying the price for it, but none like Bubba. In fact, the text I sent, some of my coworkers were like, I can't believe people are reacting, haven't even watched the show, and they're just flying off the handle about the noose and the guy from Empire and the actor and all that stuff. And I'm like, this is what Bubba deals with 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And he reads it. I mean, he goes out there and, he doesn't, he'll walk away from it for a little while, but he's, as you know, active on social media. But I just shut it down this week because it's not worth it. It's not real life, and a lot of it too is, these, and this real thing, a lot of these algorithm bots that are designed to just make us all fight with each other. That's fine. But it's, it is what it is. But I tell you this, I've learned a lot about people that I thought I knew. I mean, I've heard from some people that I grew up with, went to high school with, went to college with, whatever, and they've now stood up and identified themselves as to what who they really are. And so, in a way, it's been nice because it's kind of let me know, all right, I wasn't really friends with that guy anyway, so I'm surely not going to be now.
You said, NASCAR didn't do us any favors, but I was just thinking about this really before you hopped on here. Was like, would it have been better if NASCAR didn't let anyone know about the news and their investigation into it until it was over? Yeah, maybe. But if they don't, we don't get that moment on pit road on Monday for the drivers.
But the wording of it was wrong.
Yes.
The initial wording of it was wrong. The press conference was not handled great. You go back and look at the transcript of that press conference now and knowing what we know, and a couple of the answers make you go, man, you could have helped us out right there. Mm-hmm. They did Bubba no favors in that thing. And their intent was to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And their intent was to protect him. Their intent was to show support for him. But there was too much emotion attached to the response. The language was strong and it should have been strong, but it set the stage for what happened over the next couple of days. And listen, I'm not blaming NASCAR, but I am saying it didn't help. And the reaction was going to be the reaction regardless. Mm-hmm. Once it got out there and it was going to get out there, the crazies, they're so drawn to these things. And again, it's a lot of people out there with very important positions. Their job is to keep all of us agitated and keep everybody mad. And so, that's we saw it again, as soon as this Jesse Smollett thing, as soon as he was found guilty in the days leading up to this documentary. Yeah. And immediately, elected officials are calling Bubba out. And I'm just like, the hell are we doing? It's just, if you really know the facts, and the facts don't really seem to matter anymore, then you know what the actual story is. But the stage was set with the best intentions because people were so angry. Steve Phelps talked to us about crying when he was talking to Bubba about it that night. There was so much emotion attached to it. If you put it within the context of that weekend, first race with fans and no Confederate flags, you had those idiots riding around outside the track with the trucks. You had the guy that paid the money to fly the flag or the Confederate flag over the track. It was a powder keg. It was a powder keg. That's what was the context of that day is important. And it's a rain out. Now you got to come back and race tomorrow morning. It just was, we're still in the middle of COVID and no vaccine anywhere on the horizon. It's just a mess. And so you add all that up. I understand why things were written and said the way they were written and said, but looking back, I think they would probably like to walk some of that back a little bit.
Yeah. I really like the documentary included Howard Bryant to get his perspective. I think for my money, he had the perspective and line of the night when he said, I think the news, incident just showed that when you have something like this happens, white people will go above and beyond to say that a certain thing isn't racist. And then you'll have, somebody from the black community or whatever saying, oh no, let me tell you all the reasons this is racist.
Yeah.
I think that encapsulated a lot about what we've been dealing with for the last what, 17 months?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're 100% right. And I was so thankful that Howard agreed to talk to us. And it's, I've said this 100 times, but the film opens with one of the two stories that Bubba tells about being pulled over by police and having his vehicle searched, and can you afford this, and where are you getting the money, and all that. And I, as a 40-something-year-old white man, am horrified. This is an extraordinary story. And when I talked to Howard Bryant, and I talked to, quite frankly, any black man in the United States, they're just like, whatever, man. It happens every day, hundreds of times a day, and it's happened to me. Happened to me this time and that time, and it's it's an eye. What we over the last 17 months you're talking about, we've all been educated.
Yeah,
and it's been a very uncomfortable conversation, and some people have reacted to that lack of comfort in a disappointing fashion. But everybody's having to hear it. And so I'm thankful for Howard Bryant to come in and say things like that, because that's perspective that I can't give you. And so and Howard certainly can, and Bubba certainly can.
Was there any, like, the only other NASCAR driver that was in the final version anyway that you talked to was Jimmy Johnson, who obviously helped orchestrate what happened on the Monday at Talladega. Was there any other NASCAR drivers, like his best friend Ryan Blaney, that maybe you tried to talk to?
We reached out, and a lot of this was shot at a difficult time to set up shoots, to be honest with you.
Okay.
We got no's, but I don't believe that it was it wasn't like, oh, well, hell no, I'm not going to talk about that. Now, that being said, as you know, in the film, Bubba addresses the fact that when he reached out initially, most of the guys were like, I don't want to talk about this because the sponsors don't want me to talk about it. But we didn't get any no's that I felt like were based in that. But yeah, we interviewed Jimmy. We interviewed a couple other drivers, but it was no one was more eloquent than Jimmy. So Jimmy made the cut.
So which of your two E60s are you more proud of? Fistful of Steel or the Intimidator?
Man, that's a good question. I'm proud of both. I'm proud that they let me do both. What was interesting was it was a more emotional experience for me than I expected with both of them, because of the blowback we're talking about, and because I have to hear about the news every single day. But the Earnhardt thing too was, I was young, man, and with the Earnhardt thing, I remember coming in. I had just gotten married. My mom had just passed away, and I got to the point where, Daniel, I was covering funerals more than I was covering races. It felt like, and I knew Adam Petty, I knew Kenny Irwin, I knew all these guys, and so. And it wasn't just them. It was open wheel racing was even the worst.
Yeah.
I knew all those guys. And so I went to 3 open wheel races in a span of 12 months where people got killed. And so it just was, both were more emotional for me than I expected. But particularly Earnhardt, just because I was so young at the time and wanted to quit. I told my wife, I said, I got to go cover baseball because they're not covering funerals every weekend over there. And it was, or I got to cover something other than this. And thankfully I didn't, but it was, more proud of, I don't know. I'm proud of both of them, but I was caught off guard by how emotional the Earnhardt experience was. Going back through, my wife hates that I'm a pack rat, right? But I've got it all, man. Back here on the shelf, I got the Earnhardt crash report and all my notes from back in the day and my scripts that I wrote for features back in the 90s and 2000s. I've got all that stuff, and pulling all that stuff back out and going back through it was, that was a little more emotional for me than I expected it to be.
I would love to work on a project like this with you, just for the research element.
Well, I tell you, the best part was, so in addition to the TV part, I also will typically write like a companion piece. And with that Earnhardt thing, that's the most words I'll ever write without a book deal. Like it was a great
series. It was a great series.
I wrote a 4-part series. It was almost 30,000 words. And
wow.
The best part was, again, talking about educating editors. I have a phenomenal editor working with me on this thing. Worked at the Boston Globe and New York Times and everything else. But at one point, there was a point where he calls and he says, I can't find this story you tell anywhere. Like, there's no clips of this anywhere. How did you learn about this? And I'm like, I was there. And then, a couple of days later, this quote from Earnhardt, where did you get that? I'm like, he gave it to me. Like, I have my notes. So it's interesting. What you learn as you get older is wisdom has nothing to do with being smart. Wisdom is like Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. It's just that you've been around so long that you know things that, an increasing number of people around you don't, because, those of us who were around Dale Sr., there aren't a lot of us in the media center anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was an interesting, but again, my pack rat, I'm not going to show you, but if I turn this camera left and right, you would see my office is like a closet, but it's, my pack rat ways served me well when it comes to retrospectives.
Well, you said you were young then. I had just turned 10.
Right. I knew you were going to say that.
Within 2 weeks earlier, I turned 10 when Dale died. I unfortunately, I didn't get to watch the race because my dad, who was just as big a Earnhardt fan as me, had gone on a business trip to Detroit that weekend, and that Sunday we had taken him to the airport.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get to see it at all. So I turned on ESPN News that evening, and I see the Mike Kelton announcement.
Yep.
That's how I found out. So I never watched a lap. But I was a huge Earnhardt fan and have been for years. And for me, the 20th anniversary, I don't know if it's the same for you. The 20th anniversary was the opportunity really to kind of resolve kind of lingering emotional residue or whatever from that experience of losing Dale Earnhardt. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I think that, you think back now, 20 years ago, that was really kind of the start of the super intense 24-hour news cycle. That was still kind of a new concept. And so, to fill the space, you just have noise, right? And it's speculation about this and about that, and restrictor plate racing killed him, and so on. So everybody starts coming up with all this stuff, and just to fill the space. And so the noise starts, and I think this will happen with Bubba Wallace's story. The noise starts and everything gets lost. So you have to kind of wait 10 years or 15 years or 20 years and then look back and going back through all of what happened then, knowing that the Hans device was there. I had produced a feature for RPM Tonight the summer of 2000 about softballs and about all the different, softball systems that were out there. And in the story, every excuse in the world is why I hadn't used it. Well, you got to bolt it onto this and it creates too much debris and it'll bounce the cars back into that. But everybody, and Earnhardt himself, ripping on the Hans device. It called it a noose. And so it's crazy going back and reliving those things. But then there's clarity that comes with it, like you're talking about, where you kind of look at it and you go, okay, gosh, this is, and getting everybody to just sit in a room and get Kyle Petty for that Dale Earnhardt documentary. He was the backbone of that show. And for Kyle to sit there and talk about his son. And yes, I believe he could have been saved if we had done these things faster. And that's why Kyle wore the old clunky Hans device, like Vader helmet, right? It was huge. And then for Ryan Newman to sit there and say, I would 100% be dead if that crash had happened in 2000 as opposed to now, or even 2010 as opposed to now. So no, there's clarity in those things. And again, it's interesting when you get to a certain age and you lived it and watched it. And what's really fun is when you hear people try to tell you how it was back then. and they do not know. And I do.
I made a TikTok the other day showing some of my NASCAR memorabilia collection, and some person just commented, NASCAR hasn't been the same since Dale Sr. died. And I replied, I would hope any sport wouldn't be the same 20 years after one person died.
No, it's Marty Smith and I talk about all the time about again, those of us who were like you want to walk into the garage sometime and say, all right, show of hands, Everybody, like all those people that were walking behind Bubba Wallace's car. Show of hands. Who met Dale Earnhardt Sr.? And I don't. There's not a lot of hands that would go up, and it's just it's crazy to think about. But that's again the good news is, to quote Lee Petty. Lee Petty used to all the time. People would come up to him and say, "Man, I'm so glad to meet you," and he'd say, "I'm damn glad I'm still here so you can meet me." And that's how I feel when I start telling. So years ago, we had kind of this influx of young writers in the media center. I mean, this would have been 7-8 years ago. And one night I walked over to a couple of them. I said, "Hey, tonight, let's go to dinner." Okay. And, Tom Higgins and Steve Wade and those guys, Ed Hinton, they did that for me when I was first coming along. And so we go to dinner and I'm like, I think that the questions are going to be about interviewing style or, transitioning to TV and whatever else. And no, all the questions were, what was it like interviewing Sterling Marlin? And was Rockingham cool? I'm like, what the hell? Yeah. So I'm like, but I remember I called Higgins. I go, "Hey, I owe you an apology." So why? I said, "All these times I'm asking you questions about Curtis Turner and Joe Weatherly and Fireball Roberts." I go, "Does it make you feel old?" He's like, "Hell yeah, it makes me feel old." So that's how I feel when people are coming to me and going, "Man, what was it like when Jeff Green was great?"
That 1 year.
Yeah, it was a great year. The crew chief had the greatest mullet of all time.
I kind of have something related to that. The night Austin Dillon won the Coke 600, the first win for the 3 since 2000.
Yeah.
We're doing like the press conference stuff, and at some point I see a tweet come across from someone else in the media center, sitting way back behind me. He goes, "Can we stop making a big deal about the 3?" And I'm like, "Oh, this won't stand. This won't stand." And so afterwards, I go back to this kid. I say, "How old were you when Dale Earnhardt died?" And he's like, "I was like 4." It's like, okay, all right, never mind.
Shut up. Yeah, exactly right. But all right, that's fine. Well, I remember the late Marcy Scott, who was in PR forever. In fact, was Jeff Green's PR rep for a while back in the Busch Series days. But Marcy passed away several years ago. The media center in Atlanta is named after her. I remember standing. She and I kind of came in together. I kind of came in with this group of, some people still around doing PR. And I remember being in the back of the media center at Daytona, the new media center, some of us still call it. and I'm standing in the back row and it's jam full. And all of a sudden somebody tapped me on the shoulder and I look, and it's Marcy Scott. And she goes, "When in the hell did we become the old people in the media center talking about how it was back in the day?" Because when she and I first came along, I mean, this was the world of, Steve Wade and Monty Dutton and David Poole and Higgins and those guys were all still, plowing every single weekend. And so it was the days of Winston Cup scene. And we were the junior circuit back then, and now we're not. But but I'm thankful to have been around and to have seen all these things. And it's that kid one day that you're talking about, whoever it was in the back of the media center. "Hey kid, one day somebody's gonna look at you and go, 'Who's that old guy back there?' And you'll be thankful for
it." I have one last documentary question. Where did the title "Fistful of Steel" come from? It's kind of an odd title.
Well, Mike Farrell was the co-director on the film, and Mike is every E60 special that you know about and has won an Emmy. Mike was the director.
Okay.
More than likely was involved. Mike and John Minton. Lawrence Stoll, who I mentioned earlier, the feature producer that worked on the SC featured, she was a co-producer on it as well. But Farrell was the one that was in the edit suite all night. He came up with that. And it was kind of trailer driven. If you saw the trailer, we had that trailer where we got the music cleared and all that. And it was, I'm not a headline writer. I've always left that up to editors and left that up to like a show title like that.
Okay.
And the reason is because I'm sometimes way too inside. And so I like to leave it up to them. If I don't like it, I'll say, but I like to leave it up to them because I think they have perspective on what the story is that I don't. And I liked it. So it was, okay. And it was, Bubba has to go to work every day with his fist clenched. He just does. It's not fair. Okay. He don't want to do it. My favorite line in the doc is from Warwick Scott, one of Scott's grandson, who says, deep down, Bubba's wanting to say, can I just drive? And the reality is, no, you cannot. Warwick Scott said that before everything that happened in 2019 and 2020. He said that for an interview we did with him for the SC featured story 3 years ago. And it was pressing. I mean, it has all come true, and it's true, and he's never going to be able to do that. So he has to go to work every day with his fist clenched. He has to get on social media every day with his fist clenched. He doesn't want to have to fight through everything every day, but he has to. And so I think that's where Fistful came from.
I forgot to mention, you included the interview from 2018 with Bubba where he says he doesn't really care about the Confederate flag.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you included that because it shows how life events and time can change a person. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, he didn't really give much thought to it, but now he cares and he understands it. And I think I really appreciated the through line that kind of helped set up in a sense.
Well, to me, that's the story. I mean, the headliner is going to be the Confederate flag and the noose and him winning the race and all that. But to me, the story is watching. And again, when you've been around a while, you and I both have been fortunate to see these young guys come along. We've heard about them since they were 16. They're going to be the next Jeff Gordon. Mm-hmm. And then you watch them. They hit a crossroads. I wrote a story about Denny Hamlin his rookie year for ESPN magazine. He still gives me a hard time about it because I wrote about a kid at the crossroads. You know, he'd won the Clash. He'd won he won at Pocono. And he just signed his first big contract. And I wrote in the piece, I go, they all get to this point and they're either going to stay in touch with themselves or they're going to be jerks. Mm. And they usually come back around at the end to being to themselves again, but usually they'll depart for a little while. And he, for years, would say, well, what did I do? I'm like, well, you don't want to answer that question. but the point is that watching these guys, because our athletes don't have a lot of turnover in NASCAR, we watch them grow up. Mm. And in the case of Bubba Wallace, we've never seen someone have to grow up like he has, except for, I mean, going back to Dale Earnhardt, watching Dale Jr. He turned from a boy to a man right in front of us in one day. And Bubba Wallace, to me, did the exact same thing over the course of really just a handful of weeks when you think about it in the summer of 2020.
All right. I asked Twitter to give me some questions for you, and I got two. Okay. The first one's from Randall, and you named Jeff Gordon a minute or two ago. He asks, why does it seem that media and fans alike have forgotten how dominant of a career that Jeff Gordon had?
He's the best I ever saw. I mean, the season he had, 98. I don't know if anybody's ever going to top that. It got to the point where it actually helped train me to cover Alabama football during this phase of my career, because it got to the point where I don't know what to say. I've got to cut a highlight and I've got to write a feature and I've got to write something for ESPN magazine, and I don't know what to write. I mean, because what people don't remember about that year was he won the pole every Friday. It wasn't just that he won a race and him clinching. I always say this too: anybody that has a problem with the chase era, the playoff era, the postseason era of NASCAR, did not have to. I'm from Rockingham. I was born there. I'll be buried there. And I went to so many completely useless, why are we even here, Rockingham races. And it's because Jeff Gordon may not have officially mathematically clinched the championship by the time we got to the penultimate race of the year. But the reality was, math-wise, he had clinched in August. And he was so great. Yeah, and if it hadn't been for Jeff Gordon, we wouldn't have gotten Jimmy Johnson. He not only was he the best stock car driver I covered in my career, because I kind of caught Earnhardt at the end, was but he also, oh, by the way, brought us the guy that was the greatest of his generation statistically.
Well, I kind of get where Randall's coming from a little bit, because Gordon's last title was 20 years ago.
Yep, 20 years ago.
That's like looking back at 1981. Who won the title in 81?
Yep. Yeah. Well, we're talking about not remembering stuff that happened 20 years ago, and it was 20 years ago. I mean, that was the other thing. We rightfully so. We focus on what all Dale Earnhardt Jr. did to help everyone heal, and what Kevin Harvick did to help everyone heal. But I've always believed that Jeff Gordon's never been given enough credit for what he did in 2001, because he won a championship, but he also seized the leadership role in the garage. And he was never going to do that as long as Earnhardt was driving, and he didn't want to do that. But Jeff had a lot to do with the course correction that NASCAR needed at that point. And the most successful years in the history of the sport were the next 5 years. And Jeff Gordon set the table for that.
All right. Final question from Aaron Bearden. I'm curious how this is his tweet. I'm curious how he balances the different sports he covers. He's obviously big in the college football world. Bottom 10, baby. Does the college baseball thing, and then still makes time to write and do things in the motorsports realm. How does one schedule all that one out?
It's a Jenga puzzle. I'm really good at Tetris, which helps because that's what my schedule looks like. No, it's I love them both. I grew up on college campuses. My dad was a college football official. That's our book we wrote right there behind me and about it. And I grew up a college sports fan. When I went to ESPN right out of college, that's what I thought I was going to do. But at the time, there were only 2 Southerners in the entire company. And they're like, hey, you're from North Carolina. You know about NASCAR, right? I go, I do. And I didn't know as much as they thought I did, I don't think, but I certainly knew more than any of them did. And Jeff Gordon, I've told Jeff this, I owe him my entire career, because lo and behold, right when I started there, when he started, when he made NASCAR cool.
Yeah.
But it's the balance is that you sacrifice other sports. I couldn't tell you anything that's going on in the NFL right now. Other than the players that I covered in college. Like, I basically spent 2 years with Baker Mayfield for E60. And so I keep an eye on Baker Mayfield. I keep an eye on Joe Burrow because I covered him so intensely at LSU. He came up Marty McGee all the time. There's individuals, but I couldn't tell you the big picture. I took my family to a Panthers game last Sunday, my first weekend off since August. And I didn't even know, like, I knew Cam was back, but I didn't have any idea, are the Falcons any good? I don't know. Or the Panthers are okay. Because I always say my brain's like a city bus. It can only hold so many people. So during the fall, when the NASCAR playoffs are going on, where Bubba Wallace is winning the race, and then also we're in the throes of college football, my brain doesn't have capacity for anything else. So I'll transition. I'll start my Daytona transition. College football playoff championships, second weekend in January. I'll try to sleep for a couple of weeks, and there'll be time to go to Daytona. But as long as work keeps sending me to Daytona in February and Indianapolis in May, I'm going to make it work.
I guess, okay, you were there in 2001. With what's happening in 2022, with the new car, a bunch of new teams coming in, does 2002 or does 2022 have an 2001 feel to it?
Yeah. The TV thing was just such an overwhelming, I left ESPN and went to work for Fox myself. It was such an overwhelming story. And they were, they're so great at hype. They were then, they still are, Fox. And because of that, it was a lot of more national, I think, attention to it. But yeah, there's never been a time when there's this much change, and I'm here for it. You know me, man. I've been screaming about the schedule for 20 years. I love these places. I love going to some of them, but we've been going to some of these places twice a year for too long. The races are too long. I think they've given up way too fast on midweek summer races. I think
I absolutely agree.
Listen, the numbers are where they are, and my assignment is what it is. They used to always, talking about ESPN, would be like, all right, even when we weren't televising it, all right, this weekend here, yeah, it's Ohio State, Michigan State, but you got to go to Homestead. And that's not the case anymore. And the reason is because football is so all-consuming, and the NBA is starting, and hockey starting, and baseball's in postseason. I just think it's a mistake to try to go head-to-head against those guys. So own the summertime, But I say all that to say this. Easily the most change we've seen going into 1 year since 2001. And, I applaud them for trying some stuff. And if it doesn't work, fine, but try it and see. But I think a lot of it's going to work. Cars look cool. I know that. That's step number one is, the car of tomorrow was not a bad race car. the car tomorrow was just ugly as hell. And if that car had looked cool, nobody would have complained. And at least with these cars, they look cool. So we'll see about the lug nut thing. I think it's one of those we're all mad about, and it's going to be weird. But by the time we hit April, nobody's going to be talking about it.
All right, Ryan McGee. Thank you for dropping the hammer with me. I'm definitely going to have you on again, hopefully at some point in the near future, to just do a smorgasbord NASCAR discussion.
Yeah. So. Marty and I are trying to, like in the summertime when we're doing 3 hours of radio, Marty and I are kicking around the idea of just announcing one Saturday, and we're just going to talk about nothing but 90s NASCAR, like Jeff Green, Nesquik, for like 3 hours, and just see what happens. So
90s plus early 2000s, right?
Yeah.
It stretched into it.
That's when Marty and I first met. So yeah, we start talking about Harold Holly's mullet, and just see how many people remember, because we remember.
I don't know who that is.
Okay, I'm going to tweet it later. It's the greatest mullet of all time.
All right, so Ryan, where can people find you?
On Twitter when I bother to look at it, at ESPN McGee, and then obviously on ESPN.com and Marty and McGee. We're dark for the next couple of weeks, but we'll be back on the air. ESPN Radio, SEC Network, Saturday mornings starting January whatever that first Saturday of January is.
And Fistful of Steel, that's on ESPN Plus now, right?
Yeah, it's on ESPN Plus, and there are re-airs too. I know it re-aired again one night I wasn't expecting. So everybody just during the holidays, they'll be dropping it where they can. And if you still have ESPN News, they show those E60 docs around the clock, and it'll definitely show up there. But yeah, ESPN Plus, go get that Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN Plus bundle. It's still way cheaper than all those other ones, and you can watch Fistful of Steel.
And you'll be watching the Boba Fett show in 2 weeks, right?
Are you joking? Yeah, of course I am. No, it's I'm trying not to get too excited about it, but if you ask my wife about Mandalorian, as soon as Slave One, which is what I still call it, came flying in, Boba Fett's ship, I literally started jumping up and down in the den at 1 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, I feel like I'll be doing that like every single Wednesday for the next month and a half.
Okay, gun to your head. If you can watch an episode of one of these series tomorrow, you have to choose Boba Fett or Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
All right.
I listen, Boba Fett's the man. We've already gotten more Boba Fett than I ever expected to get.
Yeah.
But I really never thought we'd get any more Obi-Wan. And so yeah. And and plus, all due respect to the maker, I'm curious to see what Hayden Christensen can do with an actual script. And so yeah, I'm all in on that. We've already got so much more Boba Fett than I ever expected to get for the rest of my life, that if I had to pick one, it'd be Obi-Wan.
All right, thank you. I agree. So,
okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ryan McGee.
All right,
Ryan
thank
McGee,
you, man. Appreciate it.
Jordan, dropping the hammer.
Anytime.